surreybreakfast@bbc.co.uk is the email. Now, our top story this morning. Figures released by Surrey Police show that children as young as 16 have been victims of so-called revenge pornography since new legislation came into effect. In April last year, it became an offence to share private sexual photographs or films without the subject's consent. The findings come after the BBC analysed freedom of information requests from 31 police forces in England and Wales.
Well, in a moment, we're going to be looking at the figures for this area and considering whether or not the legislation is working. But first, let's hear from Hannah Thompson, who we spoke to in 2014. Now, she broke up with her boyfriend, but then found out he'd put up explicit pictures of her on the internet. She explained to us what happened.
After scrolling for only about a minute or so, I came across images of myself that we'd taken together. At first they were just underwear pictures, and as I scrolled back further I realised he'd uploaded more explicit ones where I was entirely nude. I just felt completely ill and just in shock. And then after that I just started to panic and I didn't really know what to do beyond email the website.
Was your name used or was your face used?
None of my personal contact information was attached to them, which I was grateful for in a weird way, but the images one of them had over 2,000 notes, which meant that at least that amount of people had seen it. In a couple of images my face was in them, but in others they weren't, but I still knew they were me and I still could see what men were commenting about me, and it made me feel sick. I started contacting my ex to ask him why he was doing this. At first he was extremely apologetic. He said he'd done it whilst he was angry in the middle of the night. He didn't even really remember doing it, and of course he wasn't going to do it again. They went back up again anyway.
And then you decided that you would go to the police. How were they able to help you?
Yeah, after about 6 months I sort of snapped and I went to the police, and they were very sympathetic, but they said because he wasn't attaching my personal contact information, it wasn't really covered by harassment. It would be quite difficult to prove that he was intending to harass me with this. They said that they could file a domestic incident report and have a word with him, and that domestic incident report would be useful if his behaviour escalated in the future. I felt personally that his behaviour had escalated enough already, and that talking to him would just antagonise him further. I told him that if he didn't take all images down within 24 hours that I was going to go public and I was going to tell everyone what he was doing because I was fed up with being ashamed and feeling so helpless. I put something on my Facebook and I put something on Twitter about what had been happening to me and why I believed that it should be illegal.
Well, of course, since then, it's become illegal. Hannah Thompson from Surrey there, giving us her experiences back in 2014. Let's speak now to Rupinder Bains, who's a lawyer specialising in cases involving social media. Morning to you.
Morning.
Let's go through the figures for Surrey. There were 22 incidents. The oldest was 46. The youngest was just 16, as we said. The average age, 24. Do you think a year into this legislation that this represents an improvement?
I think it does, actually. We've seen in London a large increase in the number of people reporting these offences as well. Previously, when the legislation initially came in, there wasn't much of a difference, and we were still getting a lot of inquiries ourselves. But we've noticed a reduction in the number of people coming to see us, and I believe that's because of the legislation that's come in and the number of cases that are being reported. So the legislation has definitely opened people's eyes. It's made people more aware that the law is on their side, so they do have an option to report.
Right, let's go through the freedom of information data from Surrey Police. 14% of people cautioned, 18% charged, no action for 64%, and other agency 5%, whatever that means. But it shows really that nothing happens for more than half of the victims. Is that a good thing?
It's difficult. In some instances, if you cannot prove who's put the information online, if you like, the pictures, the videos, then it is difficult to pursue a prosecution. Where it's a more obvious link to the person who's put it up. So it's very often it's a spurned boyfriend or girlfriend who's put up the images, and the link is there immediately. But where you've got someone who's a bit more tech savvy, who's taken their time to think about how I'm going to upload these pictures, it's not often possible to detect. So where there hasn't been a prosecution, very often it's the case that they haven't been able to locate the right person.
And so gathering the sufficient evidence is just too difficult?
It can be. It can be. It's always going to be impossible for legislation to keep up with internet-related matters. The internet is just running away with things. And some people have put images up on revenge porn websites. So sites specifically geared up for revenge porn. And those sites very often are based in another jurisdiction, commonly the States. And that's incredibly difficult to get images taken down.
When people sit in front of you, Rupinder, how embarrassed are they about the whole thing?
Incredibly embarrassed. It's hard enough, seeing it yourself and then knowing that family members, friends are going to be seeing it, and then approaching it with a complete stranger like us, and then us having to go through the whole scenario with them. It's a very unpleasant experience. But more and more people are taking it to the police, so that's a positive sign. But the legislation as it stands is not enough on its own. A lot more needs to be done to help the victims, if you like.
So some of us, even having a photo of us taken on the beach on holiday is almost too much. What's the effect on people who obviously clearly having some of their most intimate moments shared?
As well as just being obviously embarrassing. Many people, we've seen incidents of depression. People are fearful of their own reputations, what's going to happen when this image is viewed by colleagues, peers, employers. It can be incredibly damaging, and this is what perpetrators are not thinking about. They're not thinking about the long-term consequences. I guess common sense needs to be used on both sides now. If you know that your image is being captured, perhaps that's where we need to put a stop to things, because it's very easy now with technology the way it is, phones, smartphones, take pictures, take videos. Maybe we need to be thinking a little bit more about whether or not we need to give consent in the first place.
Rupinder, thank you. More on this through this morning here on BBC Surrey, 7:15 the time.